Hi, I'm Doerr, and this is my project titled Nursing Clinicals Under Lockdown. My research question is, how has COVID-19 impacted nursing clinicals? COVID-19 caused government mandates to stay at home, which included nursing students. Nursing schools had to adapt to get nursing students the experience they needed, which drastically changed clinicals. I would like to start off discussing what clinicals are because many of you may not be familiar with this term. Clinicals are when nursing students go to hospitals and nursing homes to provide direct patient care and practice the skills they are learning in the classroom. In order to get a nursing degree, students must spend a certain number of hours each semester at clinical to standardize the degree across the state. While classroom work is important, the time spent at clinical is where students learn the most from hands-on experience. Due to government regulations and Purdue's policies, the Purdue University School of Nursing had to go online from March through May of 2020. This led to a large gap in our education that had to be filled. Virtual simulations took the place of in-person clinicals. These virtual simulations are engaging, give feedback to the student after completion, and can be repeated until the student gets it correct. Pictured on the right is an example of a virtual simulation. The nursing student has buttons for everything that an actual nurse could do at any time. Usually something will go wrong with the patient and the nursing student must know what to do to intervene. This is what makes these simulations very engaging because there are many things the student could do, but they must pick the correct interventions to pass the simulation. Options include doing an assessment on the patient, taking vitals, calling the doctor, or many other interventions. After completion of the simulation, students at Purdue will get on Zoom and talk about how the simulation went with professors and other students. This is called debriefing and is one of the most important aspects of the simulations. The abrupt change in clinical has had impacts on students nationwide and at Purdue. According to Nurse Journal, 14,000 students preparing to graduate from undergraduate nursing programs may need to delay their graduation. This is largely due to stay-at-home orders and social distancing requirements. This not only impacts students but the nursing workforce as a whole. Students not graduating on time adds to the nursing shortage at a time they are needed the most. According to Werzak, students have expressed that they don't feel as prepared and quite ready to be nurses yet since their time was cut short in the hospitals and they only had virtual simulations. This impacts students' confidence going to the profession due to less hands-on experience at hospitals. Werzak also talked about how masks can be a barrier to communication. It makes it harder to communicate with patients. This makes it more difficult for students to communicate with patients that they have never talked to before at clinical, and to establish rapport with the patients. Nursing regulatory bodies regulate the rules to receive a nursing license and are unique to each state. They are allowing more flexibility to allow students to graduate on time. This includes increased flexibility on how clinicals are completed, like virtual simulations and debriefings. This increased flexibility allows students to progress in their programs and still acquire the critical thinking skills needed to succeed in the nursing field. Inspired by the research I just discussed, I made a survey and sent it to nursing students. I received 52 responses. The first question on the survey was, do you feel as if COVID-19 has impacted your ability to get hands-on clinical experience at any point in your nursing education? 96.2% answered yes. This is a large amount of students' education that has been at least minorly impacted by COVID-19. The second question on the survey was, have the online simulations and case studies provided a good alternative to in-person clinicals? 75% answered no, and 25% answered yes. It appears as if the majority of nursing students learn better from in-person clinical, so the shift to virtual simulations has had a major impact on our education. The third question on the survey was, did you feel as engaged in the online simulations as you did in person at clinical? 96.2% of people answered no. I think this shows again that nothing will ever be the same as in-person experience. This is why COVID-19 impacted clinical so much. However, virtual simulation is the best replacement we have found so far. The fourth question on the survey was, do you feel well prepared to become a nurse after having portions of your clinical experience online? 42.3% of people said no, and 57.7% of people said yes. This shows that some students feel less prepared due to some of the changes that had to be implemented due to COVID-19. The last question on the survey was open-ended. It asked how COVID-19 impacted your clinical experience. One respondent said, "My clinical group does debrief over Zoom, which I think takes away from meaningful conversation and is less engaging. Virtual simulation and case studies are a decent alternative to hands-on clinical, but I feel as though I'm not getting the most value out of them. Also, having to quarantine and make up clinical hours has increased my stress as a nursing student." Another respondent said, "I feel like I can't get a full experience as a nurse on the floor. We cannot go into certain rooms and we have been cut short on clinical labs and simulations." A final respondent said, "It is more difficult to pay attention and learn hands-on skills while doing online school."
Hi, Carrie.
Hi.
Could you tell us about how clinical has changed due to COVID-19 and the pros and cons of those changes?
Yes, during quarantine, clinical changed a lot. It was more of a online virtual type of setting versus in person. We weren't allowed to go into hospitals anymore, and we had these virtual simulations we had to complete. And so we had definitely like less scenarios, patient scenarios, and they were like preset to have different conditions versus in the hospital where there are a more wide variety of conditions to treat and take care of.
Okay, thanks for your response. Can you talk about how those changes have impacted your education?
Yes, I definitely feel like I have not learned as much as I should have in that semester when quarantine happened because I feel like there's a lot more different patient scenarios that you come across in the hospital. Like instead of, oh, we're looking at a patient with diabetes, it's going to be a lot more than diabetes. You're going to see so many different things in the hospital, and you're not going to be able to think everything through in the way that you do in an online sim. You're going to have to think right on the spot and make those decisions in person. And it's a lot different communicating with someone online versus in person as well. Communication is just a lot different with patients in person, and all the decisions you make, your assessments, giving medications, all that stuff. So I definitely feel like it put a damper on the education I would have gotten if that didn't happen.
All right, thanks for your time, Carrie.
Thank you.
This project is very important because it impacts the future of our healthcare team members. Current nursing students are our future healthcare members. It is critical that they get the best training that they can so they can provide the best patient care. There are not many studies on how the new clinical format has impacted nursing students' education. I think this project could pave the way for future research on this topic, along with the other sources I used. COVID-19 worsened the nursing shortage that was already present. Continued quality education of new nurses is needed now to combat the shortage. These are the sources that I used to create my presentation.